Hi there. In this video we're going to look at a more concrete example of using the group by transformation inside Power Query. So we are here right now in the groupby.xlsx workbook and we're in the store level sheet. Here's the data we want to work with, so let's click on it, head up to the Power Query tab in the ribbon and get our data from a table, like so. Okay, so let's look at this data real quick. Right now what we've got is all the different stores that we've got in our company. And we've got the state that the store exists in, and we've got its capacity. Capacity can be either small or large. And for each one of the stores, we've got the total sales this year and the number of employees. And that's nice, but we want to summarize this information. And so we're going to use group by to get some summary stats for this information. Because we don't want it at a store level, we want it at a slightly higher level. So let's head up here. We're going to click on the group by transformation. And in this first example, what we want to do is we want to group by state. So we don't want information per store. We want information grouped at the state level. Okay. And in fact, before we actually do these extra columns, I'm just going to subtract this. I'm just going to group by state, and that's it. And click OK. And if you'll notice here, when we started off here in the state column, we had two distinct values. We have Oregon and Washington. And then when I group by state, I end up with Oregon and Washington. Okay. Let me do one more thing here. If I add another column, I'm going to group by state, and then I'm going to group by capacity. Right? I'm going to click OK. So now notice we've actually got 4 rows. So if we head back here to the source table, we've got 2 distinct values for state, Oregon and Washington, and 2 distinct values for capacity, small and large. And so here in the group by results, we've got each state, and for each state, we've got each level of capacity. Okay? That's sort of how group by works. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. So let's get back on track here. I'm going to hit group by. Now again, what we want is some summary statistics at the state level. So let's group by not store but state. And the first thing we want to know the maximum number of employees for any given store. So I'm going to call this max employees. And so the operation is not a count rows, but a max. Well, what do we want the maximum of? We want the maximum for employees. So we want to, let's see if I can move this. Oh, can't move that out of the way. We want to go to the employees column, and for each store, we want the max for each state. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. And so now for each state, we've got the maximum number of employees. So let's head over here. For Oregon, it's 14. So that would probably be, looks like, yep, the Alberta store. And for Washington, it's 12. So that would be, let's see, looks to be the Camas store. Okay, so we've got the maximum number of employees. That's one stat we want, but we want another stat too. We also want the total sales. So let's click on the add button there, the little plus symbol, to add an additional aggregation to our group by table. And we want total sales. So in the initial table, we had sales for each store, but we want sales for each state. So in this one, it's going to be a sum. And we're not going to sum up the store, we're going to sum up the total sales for this year. And click OK. And so now, for each state in this table, we've got the maximum employees, and we've also got the total sales, right? So it's a little bit like a pivot table. So we've got all the stores. For Oregon, we get the maximum employees for all those stores and the total sales for all those stores. We get all the stores for Washington, we get the maximum employee for all those stores and the total sales for all those stores. Okay. And this isn't really a summary stat, but I want to do this anyways. Let's add one additional. I'm going to call it an aggregation, but it's not really an aggregation. I'm going to call this filtered table. I pretty much always call it that. So the aggregation is not, it's all rows. There's no aggregation. And so what I'm going to get is, I'm going to click OK. What I'm going to get is, over here, I'm going to get this source table, the one we grouped by, but I'm going to get it filtered by Oregon, right? So this table, right, is this here, except only for the rows where the state equals Oregon, all right? Okay, so in the next example, we're going to go ahead and start over, do basically the same thing, except rather than grouping by the state, we're actually going to group by, rather than grouping by the state, we're going to group by capacity. So let's start over and do that. I'm going to click on this little X here to get rid of this step. We're going to head over to, let's see, we're going to home group by. Okay, so we're not going to group by, certainly not going to group by store. We're not going to group by state. We're going to group by capacity, right? we're going to group by capacity. So it's either small or large. Okay, for each one of those, we want basically the same stats. We want the maximum number of employees. Okay, maximum number of employees. So we're going to take the max of the employees column in the source table. Click OK just to see what that looks like. Okay, for all the small stores, the maximum number of employees is 7. For all the large stores, the maximum number of employees is 14. And if you want to, you can come over here and verify that. You just take my word for it too. That works fine. Okay, so we want the maximum number of employees. We also want the total sales. So let's head back. If I did that too fast, we're going to click on the gear icon. We're going to add an additional aggregated column. I'm going to call this one total sales. And this one's going to be a sum of the total sales column, right? So rather than getting the total sales based on which state the stores are in, we're going to get the total sales based on whether the store is considered a small store or a large store. Okay, and finally, I'm going to click on the gear icon one more time. We're going to come up here. We're going to add a filter table. You may be wondering why I keep adding these filter table columns. When you start off, you won't use these very often because they're a little confusing to work with. As you get better, though, these things are going to come in real handy. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with these filter tables. And it also helps you understand what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead, and I can't choose a column because we're just getting all the rows. And I'm going to click OK. And so now, here in the filter tables column, I've got two tables, one for small and one for large. And essentially, they are the table that we put into the group by transformation, filtered based on this column that we grouped by. So here's, if we take this table right here and we only looked at the small stores, we would get this table right here. Notice it even has the column small in there. And if we were to look at this table right here and only look at the large stores, we would end up getting this table right here. So it's like this table is being filtered by this column right here, if you want to think of it that way. Okay, so for the last thing we want to do, what we're going to do this time is we're basically going to do both. So rather than filtering by state or filtering by capacity, we're going to filter by state and then capacity, kind of like how we started. So I'm going to click on the X, just so you can get used to seeing how this is done. I'm going to click on the Group By button to group by. Well, now we're going to group by first state and then capacity. Okay, we want the max employees, just like before, and we're going to get a max of the employees column. Okay, we also want the total sales, spelled correctly, total sales, and that's going to be a sum operation on the total sales column from last year. And finally, we're going to get a filtered table, and the operation is going to be all rows. I'm going to click OK. And so notice, now rather than getting the maximum number of employees for the state of Oregon or the capacity of small, we've got the maximum number of employees only for stores that are in Oregon and are also considered small, right? Or are in Oregon are also considered large. So it's essentially like this number right here is, it's the maximum of the employees column, but only for the stores that are Oregon and small. Anything else, it's going to ignore, right? Total sales is the same way. Mentally, this makes a lot of sense. Like for a decision maker looking at it, it's kind of obvious, but it's interesting to think about sort of how it's being done. Like this number right here represents the sum of the total sales column, but only for the stores where the state is Oregon and the capacity is small, and then where it's Oregon and large, and then where it's Washington and small, and so on and so forth. And over here, this is sort of kind of a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes. You can start thinking about each one of these aggregations is essentially you're sort of aggregating a column in this table over here, right? So the total sales here is almost like the total sales of this column, because this table here is the table we put in, but filtered by the state is equal to Oregon and the capacity is equal to small. So we're getting all these little tables here from this bigger table, and that's going to come in real handy later on. Okay, well, that's another example, concrete example of using group by. In the next example, we'll look at some transactional data and do some group by there. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful, and I will see you next video.